Marcus Williams had served as a royal guard for 12 years. His tall frame, disciplined posture, and quiet confidence spoke of countless hours protecting important people. Today was different, though. He wasn't on duty. Instead, he was traveling home to surprise his daughter Emma for her graduation from medical school. The airline ticket cost him nearly 3 months of savings. But seeing Emma's face would make every penny worth it. First class was a luxury he rarely allowed himself, but this was a special occasion. His daughter had worked so hard to become a doctor, often studying late into the night while working part-time jobs to support herself. As Marcus approached Gate 12 at London Heathrow Airport, he checked his phone one more time. Emma had no idea he was coming. She thought he was still stationed overseas and couldn't make it to her graduation ceremony. The surprise would be perfect. The boarding process began, and Marcus presented his first-class ticket to the gate agent. The young woman smiled warmly and welcomed him aboard. He made his way down the jet bridge, his military training evident in his measured steps and upright bearing. Flight attendant? Sarah Mitchell had been having a particularly stressful day. 3 flights had been delayed. 2 passengers had already complained about the temperature, and her supervisor had criticized her for not being friendly enough with the business-class passengers. When she saw Marcus walking toward first class, something about his appearance triggered her assumptions. Marcus was dressed simply in dark jeans and a plain black sweater. His shoes were clean but clearly not expensive. To Sarah, he looked completely out of place in the first-class cabin. She had seen many wealthy passengers over her 5 years as a flight attendant, and this man definitely didn't fit the profile she expected. "Excuse me?" "Sir," Sarah called out, as Marcus found his seat, too, by the window. "I think there might be some confusion with your seating assignment," Marcus looked up from stowing his small carry-on bag in the overhead compartment. "I'm sorry, is there a problem?" he asked politely, his voice calm and measured. "Could I see your boarding pass, please?" Sarah's tone was already suspicious, but she tried to maintain a professional smile. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and handed over his boarding pass. Sarah examined it carefully, then looked at him again. The ticket clearly showed seat to a first class, but something still didn't seem right to her. "Double quotes, sir? Are you sure this ticket is yours?" "Sometimes people accidentally pick up the wrong boarding pass at the gate," Sarah said, her voice growing more accusatory. Other passengers in first class began to notice the commotion. A businessman in an expensive suit looked over his newspaper with interest. An elderly woman with jewelry that sparkled under the cabin lights whispered something to her husband. Marcus felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach. He had experienced this kind of treatment before, though not often while traveling. "The ticket is definitely mine," he replied quietly. "I purchased it 3 weeks ago specifically for this flight." Sarah's supervisor, Janet Reynolds, noticed the discussion from her position near the galley. She walked over to see what was happening. Janet had been with the airline for 15 years and prided herself on maintaining order in the cabin. "What seems to be the issue here?" Janet asked, looking between Sarah and Marcus. "This gentleman has a first-class boarding pass, but I'm not sure it belongs to him," Sarah explained. Still holding Marcus's ticket, Janet looked at Marcus carefully. Like Sarah, she found herself making quick judgments based on his appearance. His clothes were neat and clean, but clearly not designer brands. His watch was functional rather than flashy. Everything about him seemed ordinary, certainly not what she expected from their typical first-class clientele. The tension in the cabin was growing thicker by the minute. Marcus remained calm on the outside, but inside he was fighting back memories of other times when people had questioned his right to be somewhere, simply because of how he looked or what he was wearing. Janet took the boarding pass from Sarah and studied it more carefully. The ticket was legitimate, printed on official airline paper with all the correct codes and Marcus's name clearly displayed, but something still bothered her about the situation, "Sir, this is quite an expensive ticket," Janet said, her voice taking on a condescending tone. "Are you absolutely certain you didn't mean to book economy class?" "Sometimes our online system can be confusing." Marcus felt his jaw tighten slightly, but his training kicked in. Years of dealing with difficult situations as a royal guard had taught him to. Remain composed even when others were being unreasonable. I am completely certain, he replied evenly. I specifically chose first class because this is a very important trip for me. The businessman in seat 1B leaned forward slightly, clearly listening to every word. Other passengers were beginning to stare, and Marcus could feel their eyes on him. The situation was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. But he refused to let these people intimidate him. Sarah whispered something to Janet, and both women looked at Marcus with growing suspicion. Sir, we're going to need to verify this ticket with our ground crew, Janet announced loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. That's fine, Marcus said calmly, though inside he was growing frustrated. But I would appreciate it if we could handle this quickly. I have a very important event to attend when I land. Janet picked up the cabin phone and dialed a number. She spoke in hushed tones for several minutes while Sarah stood guard near Marcus's seat, as if he might try to run away. The other first-class passengers were now openly watching the drama unfold, after what felt like an eternity. Janet hung up the phone and returned to Marcus's row. Sir, there seems to have been some kind of error in our system. We're going to have to ask you to move to economy class while we sort this out. Marcus looked at her in disbelief. What kind of error? You just called to verify my ticket. The ground crew needs to investigate how you obtained this boarding pass, Janet said, her voice becoming more authoritative. In the meantime, we have a lovely seat available in economy class. I purchased this ticket with my own money through your official website, Marcus stated firmly. I have the credit card receipt and email confirmation on my phone if you need to see them. Sarah stepped closer, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a discreet whisper, but was easily heard by everyone nearby. Sir, we just need to make sure everything's legitimate. I'm sure you understand our concern. The word legitimate hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus understood exactly what she was implying, and it made his blood pressure rise. He had faced down armed threats as a royal guard, but this kind of humiliation was somehow worse. An older gentleman in seat 3A cleared his throat loudly. Excuse me, but is this really necessary? The man has a valid ticket. Why don't you just let him sit down so we can take off? Janet turned toward the other passenger with a forced smile. Thank you for your concern, sir. We need to follow proper security procedures. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Janet his email confirmation and credit card statement. The evidence was overwhelming. He had legitimately purchased the ticket weeks ago. But Janet barely glanced at the screen before handing the phone back to him. I appreciate you showing me these documents, Janet said with fake politeness. But we still need you to move to economy class until we can complete our investigation. The elderly woman with the expensive jewelry spoke up from her seat. This is absolutely ridiculous. The man obviously belongs here. Just let him sit down. But Janet was determined to maintain what she saw as control of her cabin. Ma'am, I appreciate your input. But airline policy is very clear about these situations. Marcus realized that no amount of evidence was going to change these women's minds. They had made their decision based on their first impression of him, and they were going to stick to it regardless of the facts. I understand that you have policies, Marcus said, his voice still controlled but with an edge of steel that his military training had given him. But I also have rights as a paying passenger. I will not be moving to economy class because there is absolutely nothing wrong with my ticket or my right to be here. The tension in the cabin reached a breaking point as other passengers began choosing sides in the confrontation. The standoff continued for another 10 minutes as more passengers boarded the plane. Janet and Sarah huddled together near the galley, speaking in urgent whispers while glancing back at Marcus every few seconds. He remained in his seat, quietly reviewing emails on his phone and trying to stay calm. Captain Robert Hayes emerged from the cockpit to see what was causing the delay. He was an experienced pilot with 22 years of flying commercial aircraft, and he could immediately sense the tension in the first-class cabin. What's the situation here? Captain Hayes asked Janet quietly. Janet quickly explained her version of events, emphasizing her concerns about the validity of Marcus's ticket and his refusal to cooperate with their requests. She painted a picture of a difficult passenger who was disrupting the flight, refusing to follow crew instructions. Captain Hayes looked over at Marcus, who was sitting calmly in his seat, not bothering anyone. The captain had seen thousands of passengers over the years, and this man didn't look like someone causing trouble. But he also trusted his senior flight attendant's judgment. "Sir," Captain Hayes approached Marcus's seat. "I understand there's some confusion about your seating assignment. Would you mind stepping off the aircraft for a moment so we can sort this out at the gate?" Marcus looked up at the captain with a mixture of disbelief and growing anger. "Captain, I've shown multiple forms of proof that this ticket belongs to me. I purchased it legally. I've caused no disturbance. And I have every right to be in this seat." "I'm sure that's true," Captain Hayes replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "But my crew has raised some concerns, and I need to put passenger safety first. This will just take a few minutes to resolve." The businessman in 1B had been watching the entire situation unfold, and he couldn't stay quiet any longer. "Captain, I've been sitting here the whole time. This gentleman hasn't done anything wrong. He's been nothing but polite, while your staff has been treating him terribly." Several other passengers murmured their agreement. The elderly woman who had spoken up earlier was shaking her head in disgust. "This is shameful," she said loudly. "Absolutely shameful." But Captain Hayes was feeling pressure to get the flight moving. They were already running behind schedule, and his airline had been cracking down on delays. "Sir, I'm going to have to insist that you step off the aircraft. If everything checks out, you can reboard immediately." Marcus stood up slowly, military training evident in his controlled movements. He was tall enough that he had to duck slightly under the overhead compartments, and something about his bearing made everyone around him take notice. "Captain," Marcus said in a voice that carried the authority of someone used to being listened to, "I am a royal guard in Her Majesty's service. I have protected members of the royal family, foreign dignitaries, and government officials. I have been trained in security protocols that would make your airline's procedures look like child's play." The cabin fell completely silent. Even Sarah, who had been standing nearby with her arms crossed, seemed taken aback by this revelation. Marcus continued, his voice never rising, but somehow filling the entire space. "I am traveling to attend my daughter's graduation from medical school. I saved for months to afford this ticket because I wanted this trip to be special. I have shown you every piece of evidence that proves my right to be here. And yet you are treating me like a criminal." Captain Hayes looked uncomfortable for the first time. The revelation about Marcus's profession had clearly shifted something in his mind. But he felt he had gone too far to back down now. "I appreciate your service, sir," the captain said awkwardly. "But I still need you to step off the aircraft while we verify everything." Marcus gathered his small carry-on bag from the overhead compartment. As he moved toward the aisle, several passengers spoke up on his behalf. "This is discrimination," called out a young woman from seat to C. "Should be ashamed of yourselves," added the elderly gentleman in 3A. But the most powerful moment came when Marcus paused near the cockpit and turned back to address the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to remember this moment. Remember how easily people in positions of authority can abuse that power? Remember how quickly assumptions can turn into actions that hurt innocent people?" As Marcus walked down the jet bridge escorted by airline security, first-class cabin buzzed with angry conversations. Passengers were pulling out their phones, some recording videos, others calling friends and family to describe what they had just witnessed. The businessman in 1B was already typing an email to the airline's customer service department. The elderly woman was dictating a voice message to her lawyer's son. The tide of public opinion had turned completely against the airline crew. Back at the gate, Marcus sat in a plastic chair and called his daughter Emma. He knew he might miss her graduation, but she needed to know what was happening. Emma Williams had been preparing for her medical school graduation ceremony when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer, busy adjusting her cap and gown in her small apartment mirror. When she saw her father's name on the screen, her heart jumped with hope that maybe, somehow, he had found a way to attend her graduation after all. "Dad," she answered excitedly. "Please tell me you have good news." Marcus took a deep breath, trying to keep the anger out of his voice. He didn't want to ruin his daughter's special day with his problems. "Emma, sweetheart, I need to tell you something. I'm actually at the airport right now. I was coming to surprise you for your graduation. What? Really? Emma's voice filled with joy and disbelief. You're here? You're actually coming? Well, that's the complicated part, Marcus said, watching through the gate window as his flight prepared to leave without him. I'm having some issues with the airline. They removed me from my flight, and I'm not sure when I'll be able to get another one. Emma's excitement immediately turned to concern. What do you mean they removed you? What happened? Marcus explained the situation as calmly as he could, but Emma could hear the frustration in his voice. As a medical student, she had developed a keen ability to read people's emotions. Even over the phone, Dad, this is completely unacceptable, Emma said, her voice growing fierce with protective anger. You served your country for years. You've protected the royal family. How dare they treat you this way? It's okay, sweetheart, Marcus tried to reassure her. I'll figure out another way to get there. Maybe there's another flight later tonight. But Emma was already moving into action mode. The same determination that had gotten her through medical school now focused on helping her father. Dad, give me the name of the airline and your confirmation number. I'm going to make some calls. While Marcus provided the information. Emma was already Googling the airline's corporate headquarters and executive contact information. She had learned during her medical training that sometimes you had to go straight to the top to get results. Dad, I want you to do something for me, Emma said. I want you to call Colonel Morrison. Marcus was surprised by the suggestion. Colonel Morrison was his former commanding officer, a man who had gone on to become a high-ranking official in the Ministry of Defense. Emma, I can't bother him with something like this. This isn't bothering him. Dad, this is about respect and dignity. You think he doesn't know that one of his best guards is being humiliated by an airline? You think he won't care? Marcus had always been proud of his daughter's intelligence, but he was constantly amazed by her wisdom. At 26, she often saw situations more clearly than he did. Besides, Emma continued, didn't you tell me that Colonel Morrison always said you were family? That if you ever needed anything, you should call. Marcus remembered those words clearly. Colonel Morrison had said them at Marcus's retirement ceremony in front of dozens of other guards and officials. But Marcus had never imagined using that connection for something like this. I'll think about it, Marcus said. No, Dad, don't think about it. Do it right now. While I make my own calls. After hanging up with Emma, Marcus sat for several minutes staring at his phone. Colonel Morrison's number was still in his contacts, labeled simply as Colonel M. Marcus had never called it. Finally, he pressed the number and waited as the phone rang. Morrison here, came the familiar authoritative voice. Colonel. Oh. This is Marcus Williams. Marcus. What a pleasant surprise. How are you doing in civilian life? Marcus briefly explained what had happened at the airport. As he spoke, he could sense the colonel's mood shifting from friendly surprise to cold anger. Let me understand this correctly, Colonel Morrison said, his voice taking on the tone Marcus remembered from briefings about serious security threats. One of my royal guards was removed from an aircraft because the crew didn't believe he belonged in first class. Yes, sir. That's essentially what happened. There was a long pause before Colonel Morrison spoke again. Marcus, you've protected members of Parliament, foreign ambassadors, and members of the royal family. You've been trusted with state secrets and the lives of the most important people in our country. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And this airline believes you're not trustworthy enough to sit in first class on their aircraft. Apparently not. Oh. Colonel Morrison's next words were spoken with the kind of quiet intensity Marcus had learned to respect and fear during his years of service. Give me 30 minutes, Marcus. Don't go anywhere. Don't book another flight. Don't do anything. Just wait for my call. The line went dead, and Marcus knew that forces beyond his understanding had just been set in motion. 23 minutes after Colonel Morrison hung up, Marcus's phone rang again. But this time, it wasn't the colonel calling back. It was a number Marcus didn't recognize with a London area code. Mr. Williams. This is James Patterson, CEO of Britannia Airways. I believe we need to talk. Marcus was stunned. In less than half an hour, Colonel Morrison had somehow gotten the attention of the airline's chief executive officer. Yes, sir. I'm listening. Mr. Williams, I want to personally apologize for the treatment you received from my staff today. What happened to you is completely unacceptable and goes against every value our company claims to represent." Patterson's voice carried the weight of someone who clearly understood the gravity of the situation. "I've just finished reviewing security footage from the aircraft and listening to recorded conversations between my crew members. I'm horrified by what I've seen and heard." Marcus remained silent, allowing the CEO to continue. "Mr. Williams, I understand that you serve as a Royal Guard. Is that correct?" "I recently retired from that position, but yes, that was my role for 12 years. Patterson paused, and Marcus could almost hear the man's mind working through the implications. "Mr. Williams, do you have any idea what kind of security clearance and background checks are required for someone in your position?" "I have some idea. Yes, the background investigation for a Royal Guard is more thorough than what we require for our own pilots. You've been trusted with the safety of the most important people in our nation. The fact that my employees questioned your right to be on our aircraft is not just embarrassing, it's insulting. To you and to everyone you've served." Marcus was beginning to understand that this phone call was about more than just his individual situation. "Mr. Williams, I'm going to be completely honest with you. In the past hour, I've received calls from the Ministry of Defense, the Home Office, and 3 members of Parliament. I've also been informed that several passengers on your flight recorded videos of what happened and are already posting them on social media." The CEO's voice took on an even more serious tone. "But beyond all of that, I've learned something that makes this situation even more significant. Mr. Williams, are you aware that you've been recommended for the Order of the British Empire?" Marcus was completely speechless. He had no idea about any recommendation for such a prestigious honor. The recommendation was submitted by Colonel Morrison 6 months ago, citing your exemplary service and dedication. The approval process is still ongoing, but you are scheduled to be notified next month. Patterson let that information sink in before continuing. "So let me summarize what happened today. My airline staff removed a decorated veteran and candidate for one of our nation's highest honors from first class because they didn't think he looked like he belonged." There, the silence stretched. Between them, as Marcus processed this information, "Mr. Williams, here's what I'm going to do. First, the 2 crew members who were responsible for this incident are being immediately suspended pending a full investigation. Second, I'm personally ensuring that you're on the next flight to your destination, in our finest first-class accommodation, with a full refund of your original ticket cost. Third," Patterson continued, "I'm having our corporate jet prepared as an alternative, in case you prefer not to fly commercial after what you've experienced today." Marcus finally found his voice. "Mr. Patterson, I appreciate these gestures, but I'm not looking for special treatment. I just wanted to be treated like any other paying passenger. And that's exactly why this situation is so wrong," Patterson replied. "You shouldn't need special treatment. You should never have been questioned in the first place. But the reality is that you're not just any passenger. You're someone who has dedicated his life to protecting others. And my airline failed to show you basic respect?" Patterson's voice became more personal. "Mr. Williams, may I ask what was so important about this particular flight?" "My daughter is graduating from medical school tomorrow. I wanted to surprise her." The CEO was quiet for a long moment. "Your daughter is becoming a doctor. Her father is a Royal Guard. You must be incredibly proud of each other." "I am proud of her," Marcus said simply. "She's worked very hard to get where she is. Mr. Williams, I have a daughter too. If someone had prevented me from attending her graduation because they didn't think I belonged somewhere, I would be devastated and furious." Patterson cleared his throat. "Which brings me to my final point. Mr. Williams, what happened to you today wasn't just poor customer service. It was discrimination, and it was wrong. My legal team is prepared to offer you a substantial settlement, but I suspect you're going to want more than money." Double quotes. Marcus thought about Emma. About all the time she had faced her own challenges and overcome them through determination and hard work. He thought about other people who might face similar treatment but wouldn't have a Colonel Morrison to make phone calls on their behalf. "You're right, Mr. Patterson. I do want more than money, **. 6 months later, Marcus Williams sat in a mahogany-paneled conference room at one of London's most prestigious law firms. Across from him sat James Patterson, several Britannia Airways executives, and a team of lawyers. The settlement negotiations had been ongoing for weeks, but today they were finally reaching a conclusion. Marcus had indeed wanted more than money, and his demands had surprised everyone involved in the case. He hadn't asked for millions in damages or punitive compensation. Instead, he had requested something much more meaningful and far-reaching. "Mr. Williams," said Patricia Hughes, the lead attorney representing Britannia Airways, "let me make sure I understand your final terms correctly." She consulted her notes carefully. "First, you're requesting that Britannia Airways implement a comprehensive anti-discrimination training program for all customer-facing employees, with quarterly refresher courses and annual certification requirements?" "That's correct," Marcus replied. "Second, you want the airline to establish a passenger advocacy department with the authority to investigate complaints of discriminatory treatment and implement corrective measures?" "Yes." "Third, you're asking for the creation of a scholarship fund, administered jointly by the airline and the Ministry of Defense, to provide flight training opportunities for qualified candidates from underrepresented communities who want to pursue careers in aviation?" Marcus nodded. "That's right." Patricia looked up from her notes with obvious respect. "And finally, you want all of this to be implemented within 6 months, with annual public reports on the program's effectiveness?" "I do." James Patterson leaned forward in his chair. "Mr. Williams, in 30 years of business, I've never seen someone turn a personal injustice into such a comprehensive plan for positive change. This settlement is going to cost my company significantly, more than a simple financial payout would have, but it's also going to make your company better," Marcus replied. "And hopefully it will prevent other people from experiencing what I went through." Patterson smiled. "You're absolutely right. And I want you to know that the board of directors unanimously approved these terms. We don't see this as a cost, we see it as an investment in becoming the kind of airline we should have been all along." The signing ceremony was brief but meaningful. As Marcus put his pen to the final document, he thought about Emma. It was now Dr. Emma Williams, and working at a hospital in Manchester. She had been so proud when he told her about his demands in the settlement negotiations. "Dad," she had said, "you're not just solving your own problem. You're trying to solve everyone's problem." As the meeting concluded, Patricia Hughes approached Marcus privately. "Mr. Williams, I have to ask, did you always know you wanted to structure the settlement this way?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "When I was a Royal Guard, I learned that real security isn't just about protecting one person from one threat. It's about creating systems that keep everyone safer. That's what I tried to do here." 2 weeks after the settlement was finalized, Marcus received an invitation to Buckingham Palace. The Order of the British Empire ceremony was a formal affair, attended by dozens of recipients and their families. Emma was there, beaming with pride as her father received his honor from a senior royal official. But the most meaningful moment came afterward. During the reception, Colonel Morrison approached Marcus with a wide smile and a firm handshake. "Marcus, heard about your settlement with the airline? Brilliant work. Truly brilliant. Thank you, sir. I learned from the best." Colonel Morrison's expression became more serious. "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. We've been watching how you handled this entire situation, the dignity you maintained, the thoughtful way you structured the settlement, the focus on systemic change rather than personal gain." Marcus waited, sensing that something important was coming. "Marcus, how would you feel about coming back to work? Not as a Royal Guard this time, but as a consultant. We're developing new training programs for security personnel, focusing on cultural sensitivity and anti-discrimination protocols. We need someone who understands these issues from both sides, someone who has experienced discrimination, but also understands the security mindset." The offer was unexpected but exciting. Marcus had been wondering what to do with his retirement, and this seemed like a perfect opportunity to continue serving while also making a difference on the issues that had become important to him. "I'd be honored." "Sir," 6 months later, Marcus was leading training sessions for security personnel across multiple government agencies. His dignity and security program was being adopted by airports, government buildings, and private companies throughout the country. The program's core message was simple but powerful. Treating people with respect and dignity isn't just morally right, it's also more effective for actual security purposes. When people feel respected, they're more likely to cooperate, more likely to report suspicious activity, and more likely to view security personnel as allies rather than adversaries. Emma often joined her father for dinner after his training sessions, and she loved hearing his stories about the positive changes he was seeing in people's attitudes and behaviors. "Dad," she said one evening, "do you ever think about what would have happened if you had just accepted being moved to economy class?" Marcus considered the question. "Sometimes, but then I remember something my commanding officer told me years ago. He said that sometimes the most important battles aren't the ones we choose, but the ones that choose us." As Marcus looked back on the events that had started with such humiliation and frustration, he realized that being kicked off that airplane had led to some of the most meaningful work of his life. He was helping to create a world where other people wouldn't have to experience what he had gone through, and Emma had gotten her graduation surprise. After all, not just her father's presence at the ceremony, but a father who had turned a moment of injustice into a movement for positive change. The settlement with Britannia Airways was just the beginning. Marcus Williams had found his true calling, ensuring that dignity and respect weren't privileges to be earned, but rights to be guaranteed for everyone.